What's up, everybody? Welcome to Real Talk Real Estate, the channel where you get it real. This is the David Greene Show, and I'm your host, David Greene. Today, we're going to be talking about short-term rentals. Just what the hell is going on in that market? I'll probably be making more content like this in the near future. So if you are a short-term rental operator, if you've considered becoming a short-term rental operator, or if you're just curious about what's going on in the world of real estate because you like to be a fly on the wall, I think you're going to like today's show. I've gotten myself into some short-term rental jams, mostly from people in the community that don't like them. They put pressure on local legislators and city officials, and then they play dirty. And short-term rentals have become, at least the operators have, the target for a lot of politicians that are trying to keep their spot in office. And if you've ever managed one of these things yourself, you probably know what I'm talking about. If you own them, you definitely know what I'm talking about. So we're going to be sharing some information today on what's going on in this world and how non-short-term rental operators can feel about the people that have them. Let's get into our first video.
Was a full house at the Maui County Council's Housing and Land Use Committee hearing today. Members heard a controversial bill to phase out thousands of vacation rentals. 176 people signed up to testify today, but only 52 were heard. Bill 9 seeks to phase out about 6,000 short-term rentals in apartment zone districts, also referred to as the minnect list, and turn them into long-term housing for residents. Mayor Richard Bisson introduced the bill a year ago after the Lahaina fire brought the housing crisis to the forefront.
Mayor, my responsibility is always to put the greater good of our people first. Housing is not a speculative asset. It is a basic human need. And when the balance is tipped so far that our residents become outsiders in their own neighborhoods, we have a moral obligation to act.
Even with the current...
A little bit of background on what's going on in Hawaii with this situation. You always have to pay attention when you're listening to the news for how they frame situations. In this case, it's being framed that housing is not supposed to be a speculative asset, referring to investors that buy real estate and drive the prices up. It's being framed this way because they're trying to make the case that if they can outlaw investors that own properties, investors will get out of Hawaii. There will not be short-term rental properties. That will bring prices down, and Hawaiian residents will be able to buy the properties. Now, you can also fix this problem by building more homes. That would require you to have people in Hawaii that wanted to go to work and build more properties, and regulation that made more sense. And of course, it's always going to be expensive there because you got to ship the materials really far all the way across the ocean. But you could easily fix this problem by adding more inventory. But that's not the way that government officials who are lazy like to solve problems. They do it with regulation. So it's much easier to come in and say, we're going to limit or eliminate people that want to buy properties and rent them out to others. Now, it starts off as short-term rentals. Then they outlaw medium-term rentals. Then they outlaw renting to just normal people that aren't Hawaiian citizens. And what's happening is they're driving people out of owning real estate in the really expensive markets. Now, that's just starting with Hawaii. But if this passes, you may see this coming to a place near you, especially if the area itself is expensive.
Reduced values of condos. Locals are not rushing out to buy them because they're not affordable. Fees, utilities, as it's been said before, mortgages, insurance, special assessments, which is a big one. These condos are far more expensive than what the average resident can afford.
Nearly 23.
So his argument here is that, look, you can get rid of people that buy these things and operate them as short-term rentals. Not only are you going to be eliminating all of the revenue that's collected and paid to the state, you're also eliminating all of the money that is spent on local businesses. And that gentleman's case was, you could tell the news is trying to present this fairly. Look, no one's going to go buy him that's a resident. Nobody makes enough money in Hawaii to pay as much money as these actual condos cost. Now, if you didn't know, most areas in Maui, where I own mine, you can only operate if the property is in an area zoned for hotels. So these are not just residential areas where people have condos that they chose to rent out. Their area is zoned for hotels. They call them condotels, where people buy them and rent them out. So this isn't rampant running all across the island. This is a very specific area. And this idea of driving them out is probably not a practical solution. So why are they doing it? It's because it makes you very popular politically. If you can appeal to the anger of the Hawaiian citizens that are mad that homes are expensive and they can't afford them, you increase your likelihood of being identified as someone who's against the outsiders and for the locals, and you can get elected easier.
100 rentals are in West Maui. The county says it would take 30 years to build as many units. The county says 91% of the 6,000 short-term rental owners don't live in Hawaii. To offset any lost tax revenue, the county says there are multiple tools they can use to meet budgetary needs. Testimony will continue next week.
All right, that's our first video there. Let's get into another one here.
Aloha, everyone. So last week, the Maui Housing and Land Use Committee held public testimony on Bill 9, which is the highly controversial vacation rental phase-out bill. And in this video, we're going to talk about what happened in that meeting and what comes next. So last week, overflow crowds turned out to either support or oppose the phase-out of more than 6,000 short-term rental condos in Maui that have legally operated in apartment zoning for decades. And it's not over yet. More than 180 people signed up to testify, and when the meeting ended around 4:30 p.m., only 52 had had a chance to speak. So we still have to wait a while before we see how the council will ultimately vote.
Now, in case you're wondering how this might affect you if you don't own property in Hawaii, if you stay at one of my units in Kihei, depending on the time of year, it's probably going to be between $200 and $400 a night. This is a couple minutes from Wailea Beach, which is one of the nicest areas in all of Maui. If you stay at a hotel on Wailea Beach, you're probably going to be spending between $1,200 and $2,000 a night.
They will continue the public testimony next Wednesday, June 18th, starting at 9 a.m. Hawaii time. And based on how far they got in the first day, I wouldn't be surprised if they need at least one more additional day. So if you haven't already submitted your testimony, there is still time. I'll share the meeting details in the description below. Now, after the Housing and Land Use Committee completes the public testimony, the bill then advances to the full Maui County Council for even more hearings before a decision is made. So this process will take some time. And even if it does pass, the mayor is now suggesting a 3-year timeline for the phase out of these properties' short-term rental usage. And in the meantime, I'm sure there'll be class action lawsuits that can make the ultimate outcome drag out even longer. Regardless of which side you're on, this is unfortunate because this is a topic that is dividing Maui's community. Now, I did watch the entire first day's worth of testimony last week, and I've had a lot of people ask me to share my thoughts. First of all, if you want to watch the recording of the entire meeting yourself, I'll share a link in the description below so you can check it out and make your own judgments. The meeting did start with a presentation from the mayor and his staff where they outlined their justification for the bill. Of course, they highlighted the statistics that showed that there is a shortage of affordable housing here on Maui, which is something that everyone already acknowledges as a real problem. No one is debating whether or not there's a shortage of housing, but we're not in agreement on what the best way to solve the problem is. The mayor and his staff highlighted other major cities that imposed restrictions on short-term rentals in an effort to create more affordable housing. But I would argue that there's a huge difference in phasing out short-term rentals in major cities that have diversified economies where residents' income does not solely rely on the tourism industry like we do here on Maui. So I personally don't think it's a fair comparison.
And that's my point here. Whenever you make a change like this, the locals that are demanding to get rid of the short-term rental operators, they're probably not thinking like business people, because if they were, they wouldn't be insisting on this. They're thinking that by doing this, they're going to drive prices down. They're not. What's going to happen is you're going to have less tourism in Hawaii. People are going to go somewhere else. And then all the money that the tourists brought is going to go away. And all the local businesses, the surf shops, the surfboard rental places, the diving shops, the places where you can get snorkels, the restaurants, man, what else do you have out there? The ice cream shops, the food places, the tours, the guided tours, the helicopter rides, all the stuff that the locals use to make their living is going to have a significant reduction in revenue. And then they're going to go to their government and they're going to demand help for that. And when we turn to the government to fix all of our problems, we typically make things worse.
And if you look at an example like New York City, where they removed 90% of the short-term rentals, housing did not improve, rents went up, and the nightly rates for hotels in the city skyrocketed. Honestly, I believe that the only winners if Maui's Bill 9 gets passed are the hotels. So the way I see it, and based on actual economic studies.
Now, let me ask you something. Do you think that those hotel owners have a vested interest in getting rid of their competition with short-term rental operators? Do you think that those hotel operators might have deep pockets and might have something to do with possibly bribing some of these city officials to create this bill that would eliminate their competition? Do you think they might be greasing the wheels a little bit to take care of them? And if you're a politician and you're getting the carrot, so you're getting paid by the people that run the hotels, and you're getting the stick from your constituents, hey, we want them gone or else we're going to not vote for you again. Kind of a pressure do you think that brings on them to bring a bill like this forward?
There is no guarantee that eliminating these short-term rentals will create affordable housing. I really do wish it was that simple, but it's not. From a realtor's perspective, we know that most of the people who buy these short-term rentals on Maui are doing it because they want to use the properties themselves for their own vacations. If the properties are converted to long-term rentals, they can no longer use the properties themselves, so they're not likely to do it. The rental income helps to subsidize the cost of ownership. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme. If short-term rentals are phased out in these condos, it's more likely that they will become second homes and just sit vacant in between the time the owner uses the property themselves. Sure, there will be some people that have to sell because they need the rental income to carry the property. But the HOA dues and assessments alone guarantee these properties will remain unaffordable for local families. And I would speculate that the people who will end up buying them are more likely to be people who want a vacation home and that can afford to hold a property without the rental income. In this market, it'll likely be a cash buyer who's looking for a good deal. Values for these properties that are at risk of losing their ability to short-term rent have already come down significantly, and we just aren't seeing a rush of permanent residents going out to buy them. So the most powerful argument against this bill is to help those that are in favor of it understand that the proposal does not guarantee more affordable housing, but it does guarantee that it will impact Maui's biggest economic engine, which is tourism. We shouldn't be tearing down a system that is currently supporting local families without offering a real alternative to support the local economy. The mayor's extreme approach really does risk doing more harm than good. And Maui deserves a solution that actually builds housing, not destroys livelihoods. Now, as I mentioned, I did watch the entire first day of public testimony. And while I didn't keep a tally of how many people were in favor of the bill versus how many were against it, it did seem like it was very balanced. If anyone kept count on the testifiers in favor versus those in opposition, please share that in the comment section below. That being said, there were several thousand written testimonies that were submitted, and around 83% of the written testimony that is shown to the public were in strong opposition of Bill 9 and against the phase out of these short-term rentals. Now, one thing that I did find very interesting were some of the questions that came from a couple of the council members that they asked every testifier that was in opposition of the bill. They made a point to ask the name of the realtors that helped them buy their property, as if they're trying to throw the realtors under the bus. Now,
they're not only trying to throw them under the bus. My guess would be they are trying to expose that the names were white people names. They call them haoles, that they weren't Hawaiian names. And that's the way that they gain popularity amongst the local populace. They're tapping into anger and hatred of these people that had their land basically taken over and never got assimilated into the country as a whole, which I understand why they have that. But when you're angry or you're resentful, you become very easily to manipulate. If you pay attention to what's going on in LA with the riots over there, a lot of very angry people who never kind of assimilated into American culture that see themselves as citizens of another country that just happen to live here because it's better for them, makes it very easy to be exploited by wealthy people who don't want tariffs and don't want some of the other issues that are going on. And my recommendation, anybody who is realizing that about themselves, that they can be manipulated when they get angry or emotional or resentful, is you check out my faith-based mastermind Spartan League, send me a message, and I will get you some information about it. But you can tell that's what's going on here when they say, well, who is the name of the person that sold you that house? They're trying to point out that it's non-Hawaiian locals, or it's people that live there now, but they came from somewhere else that made all the money from this to portray them as greedy. Nothing stops Hawaiian residents, by the way, from becoming real estate agents. And if they did, they would probably make a lot more money because local Hawaiians like to work with other local Hawaiians.
None of the testifiers were comfortable naming the realtor, but it really wouldn't matter if they did. These properties are legally allowed to be used as short-term rentals. And that fact was codified into law. At the time of purchase, buyers followed all the county and state requirements to operate legally. And furthermore, most of these properties actually have condo declarations that were approved by the county when they were built that explicitly allow transient vacation rental use. All of this was done in the open. The county approved them to be used as transient accommodations when they were built. They passed a law codifying their ability to be used as short-term rentals, and they issued transient accommodation tax licenses to each of these owners for these properties.
And that's what's messed up. If you want to say, hey, no more applications will be given for short-term rental operators, the only housing that's built in Hawaii will be for the locals. They have every right in the world to do that. They're trying to take away licensing that was granted when people went in and paid a lot of money for those properties, knowing it's going to make them worth a lot less because no one can afford to buy them if they're not short-term rentals unless it's a local that doesn't have much money. So they're going to tank property values by doing this and screw the people that bought the properties, but they're okay with that because they're angry at anyone that's not a local Hawaiian.
I really think the county needs to take some accountability for this. It's their policies and the overregulation of the permitting process that has created this housing crisis. Now they need to prioritize solutions that are rooted in facts, statistics, and logic, not just emotions.
Well said.
Anyways, that's just a quick.
Well said. Like that point, like the gentleman's hair. Don't know if I agree with the speech cadence there. He talks a lot slower than I do, but that's okay. That's what's going on in Hawaii there, and it's not only in Hawaii.
If you're planning a staycation this summer, you'd better double check. Airbnb has started sending out cancellation notices over what it says are problems with the BC government's new registration system.
This impacts thousands of reservations across the province, at least 50% of which are domestic travelers who are following their own government's advice to support local and travel within Canada this year.
The government forcing all short-term rental hosts to register by June 23rd, part of its law to restrict vacation rentals using investment properties. But Airbnb says the provincial registration website is a mess, rejecting legitimate hosts for simple things like a space in a postal code or numbers in a street name.
We've been advising British Columbia for months and months now, as far back as last fall, that this really did need to be addressed, that we needed to make sure we did this correctly. And unfortunately, they decided to prioritize, moving quickly and implementing a system that's not working.
Sites are legally required to cancel bookings from any host that has failed registration by June 23rd. With 11 days left, Airbnb has started now to avoid hitting travelers with last-minute surprises. The BC government denies the problem, saying it's continually fixed its website and accusing Airbnb of dragging its feet in political protest.
If there are some minor discrepancies, no one needs to cancel anything. In fact, Booking.com, VRBO, all of them have similar systems, and they're not canceling any trips.
But Airbnb is the largest provider in the province, calling on BC to push the registration deadline until Labor Day to avoid summer disruptions. The minister says no.
My expectation is Airbnb will sort it out and they don't need to cancel trips unless they're using this to try to get government to change direction, which would be letting their hosts down and letting the people who use their platforms down as well.
Premier David Eby telling Czech News recently he hopes to lift restrictions when rentals and housing costs decline. But in the meantime, some summer plans could be in jeopardy.
So it's not only Hawaii that we see this happening in. It's going on across the country, and you don't hear many people talk about it, do you? How many of you that are listening to this have heard other influencers, other YouTubers, other Instagrammers talking about short-term rentals being targeted across the country, unless they were anti-short-term rental people that are just the fire in the background of their thumbnail and the world is ending and we're having a crash, which they've been calling for 10 years now.
Short-term rentals are causing problems in Jacksonville Beach. Residents call it a revolving door of bad neighbors. Others say it's making living in the area unaffordable.
Yeah, they're calling on city leaders to implement some local rules after the governor vetoed a state measure aimed at regulating vacation rentals last summer. News for Jack's consumer reporter Tiffany Salome shares their frustration and why they want to see some change.
Walking through John and Ursula's backyard in Jacksonville Beach.
Absolutely no time.
You can hear a large group of guests gathered outside of a pool of their Airbnb.
It used to be a nice neighborhood.
So it's just a rotating door of anyone and everyone that wants to come in.
It's one of the many reasons why this group of neighbors say there are just too many short-term rentals at the beaches. They report problems with noise, the guests using drugs, and in an extreme.
All right, let's get honest for a second here because I can't help myself. I agree. I wouldn't want this crap in my neighborhood either. I agree. I wouldn't want people visiting an Airbnb and throwing a party. I don't want people making loud noise. I don't want people using drugs. I don't want people being overall degenerates in the country. We all should want that. In fact, if you live your life by the values that I aspire to live mine by, you treat others the way you want to be treated. Meaning, if you're trying to sleep, you don't want a bunch of other people making a lot of noise disturbing you. If you've got little kids, you don't want people going down the street in their car playing loud music that has vulgarity for your little kids to hear, or at least you shouldn't. These neighbors shouldn't be upset about people behaving this way in their neighborhoods because it shouldn't be happening. We have things in place to take care of this. They're called police officers. They have city ordinances and statutes that prohibit this from happening. We could let the police go in there and shut it down. When you're a guest in someone else's home, which is what happens when you use Airbnb, you are a paid guest, you can still be held accountable to the laws of the area. Just like if it wasn't an Airbnb and you had a neighbor that lived in the house and they were being loud and they were using drugs and they were keeping people up, you would call the police and say, make them be quiet. We could let people be held accountable by law enforcement and give law enforcement the authority to go shut this crap down when it happens. But we don't. We're cowards. We don't want law enforcement to go in there and enforce laws. We want to beat up on them so that the people that are breaking the laws look like the victims and they gain the power. And that's what we have. So what do we do instead? We go after the small business owner that bought the place that has nothing to do with the loud music, and we say, shut them down. And the cities go attack the people that bought the properties, and the neighbors go pressure the cities to attack the people because we're freaking cowards. We could easily be letting the cops go in there and handle this. Airbnb could have a policy where if you're a guest and you go in there and the police get called on you, you can't rent properties on Airbnb anymore. We could sniff all of them out, and these idiots that go in there and screw things up could be rooted out. But we don't. And so we end up with a problem like this. I would much rather see the pressure shifted from the person that bought the house with 20% down, spent a whole bunch more money to fix it up, put their life savings into getting this property a really nice place that families can enjoy when they want to go to the beach. Because no one's complaining about a 4-year-old in their little floaties walking to the ocean super excited, right? Why are we punishing those people so they're forced to stay at a Motel 6 because they can't rent somebody's house? Because of the few neighbors that are bad apples because we won't let the cops go in there and do their job. It's kind of insane from my perspective that we're in this boat where these people are on the news complaining about what's going on because we won't just let law enforcement go in there and enforce the laws that we already have on the books.
Case, a deadly shooting at a nearby rental property.
Would you guys say that these properties diminish your quality of life?
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
110%.
As well as the property value itself.
I think to me, it's safety. My family, I'm concerned about my family. There's no screening.
It's really just and you don't know what you're going to get every single day, every single week. It's different types of groups, but
This is ignorance of the law. They don't realize that if you get rid of the short-term rentals and you just let somebody else rent the house, you're not allowed to screen for a lot of the stuff they're talking about. There's fair housing laws that allow people to rent houses regardless of the character of the person. You can't tell them no. You just end up with a long-term neighbor that causes a lot of these problems instead of a short-term neighbor.
their intent is to party and they're not here to be a part of the neighborhood.
Short-term rentals are popping up all over Jacksonville Beach. When we looked online this morning, we counted more than 500 properties listed on Airbnb alone. We reached out to city leaders ourselves with their concerns.
Please hold while I try to connect you.
But couldn't get a timely response.
I imagine some of you have raised concerns with your city leaders. What has their response been like?
What response?
Yeah, they said they blame it on the state. They say they're just following the state's lead, which again, they don't need to do.
The quote that I just got from City Hall was, it's their house, they can do whatever they want. And the reality is they can't do whatever they want. They cannot knock down, if this is my house, I can't knock it down and put a gas station in tomorrow. I'm not allowed to do that. That's commercial. So Airbnb and Vrbo have found loopholes to get around the commercial zoning. That's the issue. So what we'd like to see is code enforcement. We'd like to see our city, Jacks Beach, do exactly what Tampa and St. Pete have started doing, which is banning these properties.
Reporting in Jacksonville Beach, Tiffany Salome, Channel 4, the local station.
And that's what you see the local populace is asking for. All right. Let's get into a couple other questions here. First, we got to figure out why my screen isn't being shared. We have JMC who says, what do you think of the idea that Airbnb and similar services be limited to renting out a room rather than the whole house? The property owner can make some extra money and supply would be maintained. What do I think about that idea? The first thing I would think is you're not getting a whole lot of people that want to rent a room on a property. They're going to want to rent the whole thing. The next thing that I would think is you're letting strangers into the house that you're living in at the same time. That would cause a whole bunch more problems. Like, I don't know how many people that go on vacation want to rent a room. They want to rent a house. I don't think the problem is normal people. The problem is, for lack of a better phrase, bad humans that do this kind of stuff. When you act in that way, that is not how you would want to be treated. And we don't punish the human, we punish the system. Or we try to take it out by the root, which is the person who owns the house or the person that manages the house or whatever. You create these stupid problems. Like, they're saying that it's not zoned for commercial, but the state of Florida has said, hey, if you own the home, you can use it how you want. We are not considering it commerce. Just like they can't stop you from letting a guest in the house if you're there. It's the same thing. I really don't think this problem is something that we need to change zoning laws. It's something that we need to give police authority to go in there and shut people down. And if you're creating havoc like this, take them to the jail and have them booked, and let the stories get out there that if you act like a jackass, then you're going to go to jail and your party and your vacation's going to be ruined. Make it a law that if you have 6 people that register and 20 people show up or 30 people show up for a party, the police don't have to live in fear of getting bad press if they go in there because of the demographics of the people that are doing it. You probably wouldn't have this problem in these scenarios. You wouldn't have to worry about Airbnb being the problem. There's obviously a market for people that just want to go stay at a house when they want to go visit the beach and they don't want to stay at a hotel. From LinkedIn user, STRs are being blamed for the affordability crisis, even though they actually kept the ball rolling economically for many economies when affordability tanked. And that is the way that, unfortunately, we in America who become very entitled handle things. When you're fixing the economy, we love you. When you have a bunch of Karens that are mad about the situation, we hate you. And I can be a Karen at times too. I could be in situations where I don't like the neighbors doing certain things. I just don't think you should say it's illegal for that person of that ethnicity to buy a house. No, you go for the individual and you let them be held accountable for their actions. You don't blame everybody that belongs to that group. Sounds like they moved somewhere where there was no HOA. Looks like bad business planning. Doing business in residential areas maybe isn't wise. It looks like it's not wise right now with the way that things are going. Michael in Haiti says, disagree. It's an issue with zoning. Who's to say that second homeowners or long-term rentals will behave better than short-term tenants in these towns? Also, short-term rental guests are exactly that, short-term. If they suck, they'll be gone soon. That's a great point, and that's echoing the sentiment I made a little bit earlier. You are not fixing the problem by getting rid of short-term rentals. You're just creating a different problem where now you have a tenant that moves in there and throws parties, and what do? They don't leave right away. You're stuck with them for as long as they pay rent. Kind of the same thing in Hawaii. You don't fix your housing affordability problem by driving out all the people that live in the mainland that own property there. You create a bigger problem where the locals now can't run their businesses and they all get on government welfare, and the government's not being funded to be able to take care of them because the government gets its revenue from taxes, which aren't being collected anymore. And you still have houses that are way too expensive for the locals to be able to afford. Why not make it a private operation? That way you get guarantees at 25. That way now you're the one breaking the law by association with someone outside your net worth and the government doesn't get sued. John, I'm not following you there. Michael says, I think Airbnb really short-term becomes commercial use. So Michael thinks we should zone anybody that wants to have an Airbnb of their home as commercial. The problem is if you bought the house with that intention and they pull the rug out from underneath you, that's not fair to the people. It'd be like if you were a professional sports team and you drafted a player that was really good at shooting three-pointers, and then the league the next year said, there's too many threes being shot. Nobody's dunking anymore. We want to see more dunks. We're outlawing three-pointers. Kind of sucks when they didn't tell you that they were going to do that beforehand. But these aren't rich billionaire sports teams owners. These are regular, hardworking Americans that are trying to provide for their own retirement so that they're not dependent on the government when they retire to pay for them. These are the average Americans. Remember, we're supposed to be the ones, the government's supposed to be serving us. The government is not supposed to be something that we serve. We are not supposed to be little sheep that just give all of our money to the government so that they can redistribute it and stay in power. They're supposed to be elected officials that solve problems on our behalf. And when you watch these videos, I know I'm a little bit angry. This is Angry Dave more so than you usually see on these videos. They're not offering any solutions. That's where my anger comes from. They're not putting their heads together and saying, let's be smart, because people trusted us with this power and authority that they gave us to be intelligent and solve problems. They're just stoking the fires of angry people and then giving them what they want to get reelected and causing a bigger problem that those people are going to be upset about. Have you ever had a child that wanted to go to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning and you said, no, you can't? The kid actually thinks that if you let them stay awake, their problem would be solved. They don't realize they're getting a bigger problem if they have to go to bed early. It's very similar with these situations. The neighbors are mad. They're holding their little Pomeranians and they're mad at the people that aren't locals that they think are driving up the price of all their housing. They're being taken advantage of by their politicians that don't want to tell them the truth. They said it would take 30 years to build the housing. Why? Why in Maui would it take 30 years? Why don't they bring people in from Kentucky that really want to work, pay them a lot more than they would make in Kentucky, but that's still a lot less than the local greedy contractors are going to make, and have them build apartments and condos on the water that are worth a lot of money for the locals to live in? That's a solution that could work out. No one will do it. No one's thinking that way, because you don't get reelected by having smart ideas. You get reelected by pissing people off and then telling them that you're on their side. Government changing the rules sucks. Needs to happen. Renting by the room could be an extension of house hacking, but charging a small premium. Yep, you could do that now. Nothing's stopping it. There just isn't a lot of demand. Michael in Haiti says, sure, property owners have entitlements. Maybe cities can allow or recoding for Airbnb in multi-residential zoning locations. Yeah, or they could just say, hey, from this point forward, we're not going to allow it anymore. And like I said, Michael in Haiti, this is a pretty easy problem. Guys, if we're being completely transparent and we're not worried about optics, we're not worried about how things look, you just let the police go in there when someone's having a party and stop it. You have the politicians make a law that you can't be of a certain decibel level loud. You can't be disrupting a neighborhood with noise. You can't be trashing somebody else's property when you're in it. And you go in there and arrest them for vandalism when they're throwing a party and they're destroying the property. And you make it painful to be a craphead. You make it suck to be bad. And then people naturally want to be good, and we don't even have to have the discussion. The reason that so many of these complicated solutions are being presented is we won't just go do the very easy thing that would fix this problem. No, you're not angry, David. You're 100% correct. In a perfect world, every corporation would pay zero taxes because the government isn't needed. It can be frustrating when a system is broken. I don't know about the zero taxes thing, because I think we're always going to need some kind of government. Yeah, we would pay a lot less if we had everybody in the country working and less people that were demanding someone else, aka the government, fix their problems for them. And JMC says, might be we're dealing with annoying people if you could get double from a room than you would from a long-term flat mate. I just don't know if you'd have demand there, JMC. I don't know how many people are traveling to Jackson Beach and wanting to rent a room from somebody when they're bringing a family or 2 to 3 families are vacationing together. Are we willing to ruin that part of the American experience where you and your cousins don't get to go to the beach together because you can't have a bunch of people because you can't fit them in a hotel room? Or we're going to have hotels that build houses and have a little flat where only the hotels are making all the money, and the regular mom and pops of the world that just want to plan for their retirement and get ahead and have a dream to run a bed and breakfast can't, because you have the property owners that are pissed about it and the city officials that just bend over backwards and say, oh my God, we're so sorry. Please don't be mad. Please vote for us on the next time. Everybody suffers. The overall experience suffers when you hoard that area of the beach in the country to only a specific group of people that can afford to live in that area, and nobody else gets to use it. But maybe I'm wrong. There could be a perspective I'm missing here. I hope if you're listening to this, you don't think that I'm against the residents that want peace in their life. I want them to have peace. I am definitely not against Hawaiians that want affordable housing. I think it's a shame you don't have it. I think your own politicians have let you down massively. I think that they've tapped into the anger and resentment and bitterness from legit grievances that happened and stopped them from getting over it, and just told them that there's a boogeyman out there that you should be angry at. And I think a lot of people, frankly, are being manipulated by politicians by being told that there's a boogeyman out there that's the problem, and you need to fight them, and you need to elect us to go do it for you. And meanwhile, they just stoke the fires of your hatred and never offer you an actual solution that would make the problem go away to where we could possibly all get along with each other. I'd love to see more affordable housing in Hawaii. And I think it's a shame that me sitting here with no political experience can come up with ideas like bringing people in from poor areas of the country that really want to work, and having them build the housing for the local residents, and then having the taxes from the wealthy people that own property in Hawaii pay the people come in from Louisiana or Missouri or Kentucky to build the houses, so the residents get cheap housing built by mainlanders that is funded by the people who bought property in Hawaii, and the locals actually get a benefit from their land being bought by people that are not from Hawaii. I think everybody wins in that solution. And things like that don't even get brought up. Why? Because we're emotional, because we're angry, because we're stoking the fires of resentment, and we're keeping people in a state of anger instead of a state of creativity. But let me know. I may be wrong here. Michael and Haiti says, God bless David. Always enjoy your videos and lives. Thank you for that. I don't know everything, and there could be elements I'm not missing. Let me know in the comments if you think that there are actual solutions, or if there's something we need to pursue as a country to get to the point we're coming up with solutions instead of just finger pointing and blaming and burning things down like petulant children to get our way. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. I'll be going live again soon, talking about tariffs and the impact that they are likely going to have on the economy and how we can prepare for it. I'll see you guys on the next one.